Good afternoon, Karen. How are you today?
I'm doing well, David. Good to see you.
Yes, thank you for joining me today. Today we're going to talk about the secret life of an ice queen. And just to remind everybody, my name is David Cope, and I'm the founder of a New Life Center. And Karen is our relationship program teacher at a New Life Center. I got involved in relationships after my divorce in 2000 when I was really committed to figuring out how to have a loving and intimate relationship. And I've been working really hard on myself and trying to understand the mechanics of how we work in relationships, understand the human behavior. And over the last 15 years, I've been developing processes that allow our students at a New Life Center to uncover their hidden patterns and understand why they're created and give them solutions to some very common behavioral patterns they've had. So today we're going to be talking about the secret life of an ice queen. And I think I want to remind our listeners that when we're doing these broadcasts, I hope that you will keep an open mind and allow yourself to see you as the person that we're talking about. And that's important because if you can't see yourself in the discussion, it's going to be really hard to make the changes that you need to create the intimacy that you're looking in your marriage. Because some of the central themes of what we're trying to teach you is that you can only change yourself. Though your husband has his own issues, intimacy begins with you, and you're the only person that can change yourself to create the intimacy you desire within yourself first. And also to know that we're going to be talking a lot about taking responsibility for your own happiness, that it's not the responsibility of your partner to make you happy or create an environment that allows you to be happy, because as we know, we can make ourselves happy, nobody can. And that to remind you that intimacy begins first with a relationship with yourself. So today we're talking about the secret life of an ice queen, which is why do we as humans create walls around our heart to protect us from the pain of being in a relationship with another. So Karen, can you talk a little bit about the secret life of an ice queen as you know yourself?
I sure can. That was one of the things I had to be willing to see about myself to really begin to make some changes in my marriage and create intimacy with myself and in my marriage with my husband.
How did it feel the first time you realized that you were an ice queen? What is an ice queen?
To me, and being the ice queen is having enormous walls up around myself to completely push my husband away because I'm not taking responsibility for my happiness and because I feel bad about myself and I'm blaming him for it. So I become distant and shut down and shut off. And it's as if there's nobody home inside of me. And my husband feels that.
And what was it like when you first realized that you were an ice queen, and maybe you thought all the other women might be, but not me?
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't me. It was really vulnerable and humbling to see myself as the ice queen because I had built up such a story with my happy pill that Peggy and I talked about last week, that I was open and caring and happy and showing up in my relationship. And I had created that story so that I didn't have to see what was really going on and who I was really being in my marriage. So when I had to first uncover that, it was a hard pill to swallow, and it wasn't fun to see. But I was at a place where what I was doing and what I was trying to create in my marriage wasn't working. And so I had to be brave enough and have the courage to see that I had to look at myself, and because I was the only one that I could change. So I wanted to uncover these things in me, like seeing myself as the ice queen, but it's not fun and it's not easy.
So can you share a little bit about how we create walls around our heart to protect us that causes us to become, for women to become ice queens?
Yeah. So for me, I really started working on myself in my marriage. And prior to my husband, I had, and including my husband, I had 5 committed serious relationships. And every time those relationships failed and didn't work, my heart got broken. And I carried all of this pain from each relationship that I would have with a man, and all my disappointments and all my hurts. I carried forward into every single relationship. And because I didn't know how to work through any of that pain. So I just stuffed it down and pretended it wasn't there, but it was there, and it came with me into every relationship, including my marriage. And over time, because that was the span of 12 years or so of hurt and pain that I was carrying around. By the time I got in my marriage, it was just a huge wall up. And that's how I became the ice queen over time, by not working through the pain that I was accumulating in my relationships and my failures in my relationships.
So can you talk a little bit more about what's it like living as the ice queen? I know often we say, we live with our hands up unconsciously, keeping everybody at a distance, not wanting to let people in because we're afraid that we're going to be hurt and there's going to be a pain associated with letting people in. So we live kind of unconsciously with our hands outstretched in life, not only with our husband but other people in our relationships, whether it's our mom or dad or sisters, and we're very afraid at a deep and fundamental level to let people in because we don't want to get hurt and feel the pain. Can you talk a little bit about how you experienced that?
Yeah. In my relationship with my husband, one of the very first things that I started to catch when I wanted to look at myself and I wanted to start to work on things is that anytime my husband came near me to touch me, even just being in the kitchen and him coming up and putting a hand on my shoulder or giving me a hug, I began to notice I would flinch away and jerk away. And for a while, that was unconscious to me. I didn't realize I was doing that. And my husband was very brave one day and pointed out, hey, do you know that when I come to touch you or give you a hug, that you pull away from me? And then I began to see it. And it was almost heartbreaking to realize I had become that walled off in myself. So where I didn't even want him to give me a hug or a pat on the back or any kind of physical closeness. So that was one major way that it showed up. Also sleeping on the very edge of the bed of, don't come close to me in bed. Don't try to cuddle me. So I'd be on the very edge of the bed, creating distance, physical distance. And then the other ways it showed up is I wasn't opening up or sharing anything with my husband. If I was upset about anything, or even if there was something good going on in my life, I just stopped sharing and completely shut him out. And he would feel that and say, hey, Kit, what's going on? And my ice queen response, nothing. I'm fine. Nothing's going on. I don't know what you're talking about. And it was just this constant pushing away. And that showed up in many other areas of my life, with my family, with close friends, with friends and family. What happened is I stopped reaching out. I stopped calling. I ignored people. So it really affects every single area of my life because it's me. It's not just my marriage, or it's everywhere.
So what you're saying is, when you build your walls up, you're really building your walls up against yourself. You're hiding within the walls and then you take that out into all your relationships. And how did you get to the place, Karen, where you could make the switch and realize that it's not your husband that's making you feel that, pushing you away, that the lack, somehow the lack of intimacy that he wasn't providing for you was the cause of why that you were so distant? When did you get to the point to realize that it wasn't your husband that was the source of your walls, that it was actually you, so you could look at yourself? Because that's one of the challenges we have, the way the mind works and we interpret our situation is we think we wouldn't be this way if it wasn't for our husband. If he was only more connecting and was more attuned to me, I would feel more open and feel like I could share myself with him. So where did you get to that point where you started to make the switch that you realized that it was you that had the walls, were pushing your husband away?
Well, it took working through a lot of stubbornness to see that. And I didn't know how to even begin to look at myself and see that I was the problem. And still, I started going through the programs and processes with the new Life Center to be able to even have the context to know how to look at myself and see how I was creating my experience. So I needed someone to teach me how to do that and how to look within myself, because I was so convinced it was my husband. And every response, you don't know my husband though, and you don't know how he's showing up. And I had to work through that stubbornness and get to the point where what I was experiencing in my relationship and the dead end that I was hitting was much more painful than taking the steps to move forward and do something different. Until I hit that point, there was no book, no teacher, no one that was going to push me to look at myself in that way. So I had to get to that place.
Thank you, Karen. So just for our listeners, just to be sure that we're not saying that the men don't have their own issues and that they have to work on themselves, but in developing intimacy for women in a relationship, the place to start is the realization is the only person that you can change is yourself. And when you're willing to look inside and see what it is that you're hiding from and withdrawing from within yourself, you begin to open up the possibility that you can let your walls down and you can feel safe, and there is a way for doing that. So I just want to remind the women listeners that this doesn't mean that your husband doesn't have his own issues, but if we can realize that you do have walls up, and that's a normal human experience, that as humans we go through life feeling the pain of our life without knowing what to do with them, and they accumulate over time in all of our losses. So it's very normal for us as humans to protect our heart from being hurt and distance ourselves and slowly withdraw within ourselves as a way of protection. So we just want you to realize that this is a normal experience, and that is very common for all of us to feel that way. What was it like living inside you as the Ice Queen? How did you experience yourself when you were pushing your husband away and had all these walls up? What's it like living as you?
For so long, I was so shut down to what my experience was of myself, that I was so numbed out that I couldn't even begin to have told you what the experience of myself was. That's how disconnected I was from me and what I was actually feeling inside of me. And that was really hard to come to, because again, I tokened myself on being this aware person and then realized, I didn't have any self-awareness. And once I began to understand and learn how to look at that in myself, I realized I was in a lot of pain. And I didn't like myself for who I was being in my marriage and in my relationship with myself. I felt really frustrated and like I was the only one that missed out on the manual on how to have a marriage or a healthy relationship, and that I essentially was just hopeless, that there was no hope for me. I remember knowing, once I began to see this in myself, I remember getting really angry with me. Like, why can't I just stop this? I know I'm hurting myself. I can clearly see I'm hurting my husband. Mm-hmm. And feeling so like, I keep doing this. When am I going to stop doing this? How do I stop doing this? And so it was really hard. I realized I was in a lot of pain, but that was the first step towards making change in myself, to let that go and beginning to see, okay, this is me. And then I could look back in my past relationships and realize, oh, I was showing up this way with all the other men too, as not just my husband. And that helped me to start to see I'm the common denominator in my relationships with men. And this is a problem in myself. And let's get to working on it, because this doesn't feel good. And that was my experience of it.
So, Carrie, could you kind of give us an overview of, again, for our listeners, how does this happen? How do we get to this place in a marriage when we think that the source of our unhappiness and the lack of intimacy is caused by somebody else?
Sure.
And then how do we begin to turn this around to realize that like you said, I am the common denominator to all of my relationships, and to seeing ourselves as doing this in each of them, and that therefore it must be me that is the problem.
Sure. I think one of the first things that, David, you've mentioned in this interview that's really important to remember, the first thing is to understand this is normal. And this is common across most women. There's not a woman that I've worked with who's been a client of me that doesn't know exactly what I'm talking about when I say ice queen. And I talk about myself as ice queen. They're like, oh, here we go, because they know it's in them. So one, it's common and it's normal. And to be able to understand it and look at it in yourself, you have to be willing to look. You have to be willing to see yourself. Like David said, you have to see that what we are talking about today is in you. And if you have that curiosity and you're at that place in your marriage or your relationship of, I can't do this anymore, that's a really good motivator. Just to slow down and see these things in yourself, and to know that it doesn't happen. You don't become the ice queen and you don't build the walls because you're a bad person or you're doing something wrong. That's what I thought. Like, I am just a horrible, wrong, bad person. That slowed my process down to overcoming this, because I was making myself wrong for it. Now I understand this is common and normal, and we do it from a place of, we've gotten hurt in our relationships and we've gotten hurt in our lives. And naturally, as humans, we close our hearts off and protect ourselves because we become so scared of getting hurt again. And it's like, I don't know if I can take anymore. So we build our walls, and it happened before I could even have the awareness or the realization that I was doing it. So that's where it comes from. It comes from going through pain and loss and hurt in life and closing our hearts down to it. That's why we become the ice queen, not because we're bad people or bad women. It's just normal, and that's how we respond. So I think that's kind of a recap of where we're going. This is normal. We do it because we don't want to endure any more pain or get our hearts broken anymore. And the way to overcome it is being willing to see that it's in you, and being willing to see this in yourself, and then you can start to make the steps out of it.
Can you remind people, about our listeners, that in the context of which we're talking about and what type of relationship that is, that it's two good people? And I think it's very important, because sometimes this only works under what circumstances? This
only works in the circumstances of two people who are generally good people and have normal marital problems, although those problems can be either really big right now for you or on a smaller scale, but they're normal issues that come up in a marriage. And this information in this context is only applicable when you're with a good man, not in a relationship that's toxic and abusive, or there's addiction going on, or really toxic lies and deceit. That's not what we're talking about.
Okay,
these are normal marital problems.
And so, Karen, what do people need to do if they need some help, and how to get themselves out of this rut that they're in, where they think that their source of their unhappiness is caused by somebody else?
Yeah. So keep watching our videos and checking in to see the things that we're talking about and posting within our Facebook group. If you want some personal help and you want to get clear on specific problems you are having, please feel free to private message me in the Facebook group, and we will schedule a video call together and see how we might be able to work together and fix your problems.
Great. Thank you, Karen. Appreciate the time, and thank you to our listeners for letting us share this information. We're very excited that we have a plan and a process that involves deep transformational work that allows you to make the changes that you've always been wanting to. And this is based upon 12 years of research and study of how human behavior works, and we're very excited to share this information and to give you a way out of feeling trapped in a marriage where you don't know how to get out. So thank you for joining us. Thank you, Karen, for sharing so much about the secret life of an ice queen.
Of course. Thank you, David. See you all soon.
Okay, bye-bye.